Welcome to the DT Podcast. I'm Alex Furches. This episode is the first in a series of 4 featuring a conversation I had with Sander Kamphuis, CEO and founder of a company called Moovd. Now, he and his Dutch colleagues have created an AI-driven EMDR software called WeMind. Now, some of you are probably tuning in to this program for the first time because you saw the terms AI and EMDR in the same place. Some of you are probably excited about possibilities. Others are probably a little skeptical. And others of you may be very concerned about what this is or where it's headed in the future. Now, I was all of the above, so I knew it was going to make for an awesome podcast episode, and it did. Sander and I had a lot of fun with this. It was a great conversation. I encourage you to stick around for the future episodes of this conversation. Mr. Kamphuis is a dynamic and engaging personality. He is an intelligent man. And as you might imagine, I asked him some really hard questions. It got even into the philosophical about AI itself, especially concerning the treatment of complex trauma and attachment wounds. So I hope you stick around for that because this episode is more of an introduction to WeMind, where I start to touch upon the research validity, because they are using this with complex trauma currently. And he's got some of the biggest names in EMDR behind him and helping him. People like Jongh, Susie Matthijssen, both of whom will be on this program later this year, and Mark Nickerson, a man I work with and highly respect. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and check it out. Sander, thanks for coming on the program. So tell us about this company you've got and how we're augmenting EMDR with AI systems.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me today. My name is Sander Kamphuis. I'm the founder of Moovd. We have developed a platform called WeMind, and with WeMind, we introduce technology in EMDR, and we integrate AI in EMDR therapy. We do this by helping a clinician with getting most out of a session. So it really speaks for the therapist, and we just try to help more and more clinicians get most out of a session, and that's where it's all about for us.
Mhm. And you've got some big names working with you. You've got
True.
Jongh, Susie Matthijssen, Roy Kiesling, and you just mentioned Mark Nickerson before the program started. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we started the company 4 years ago here in the Netherlands, Europe, we kind of started from a research perspective. So it was like, let's build programs that work for clinicians, and so we started building the WeMind platform. But we know on forehand that building evidence-based solutions will help with further introducing apps like this. So at first start, we got in contact with Jongh and later on with Susie Matthijssen, and we were doing some studies together with the clinics that they're leading. Now, 4 years later, during the advisory board, they introduced us to more international experts. So it introduced us to Roy Kiesling, Mark Nickerson. So we're working with them as well. So yeah, lately we're talking with a lot of consultants and trainers because what we see in EMDR, every country or a lot of different countries have own perspectives on how EMDR is being done. You have certain mechanisms of action, and we just try to build the best product for a broad public of clinicians. And that's why we think getting feedback from a lot of experts on how they do it will eventually help building the best product. And that's why we try to add them.
Okay, so you're currently famous for WeMind. This is what's everywhere. And as just a by the way to the audience, we're going to be speaking mostly about the AI aspects. For more purely clinical aspects, Leading Edge Seminars YouTube channel did a interview largely with Roy Kiesling, who speaks about his experience with that. But hopefully we're going to be able to speak about where this is going next which is what I'm very interested in, So Sander, you spoke earlier about how the trainers are getting older and the participants in trainings are getting younger and younger. So,
True. True. It is interesting that if you're looking at like how EMDR training is organized, it's mostly similar all around the world in our experience. So here in the Netherlands, but also in the US and in Canada. And there are certain levels in it. And to achieve a trainer status or level, there has to be a certain level of experience in. And that would mean that people are older and older. And that's completely fine because the knowledge is there. But with recent technology developments like AI, for example, if you follow closely the developments with like ChatGPT, OpenAI, and the large language models, those are being built by young developers, so
mm,
30 or mid 30. So there's a gap between the knowledge in terms of scientific and evidence-based treatment and technology. And there are some gaps that can be filled in our opinion. So we try to fill that gap with WeMind to introduce new technology to well-researched but more traditional ways of therapy. And our solution, luckily, speaks to the, as you said, maybe older generation, but is even more natural for the younger generation. So we don't focus mainly on the older generation, but we see that the younger generation works really well with technology in EMDR.
so the thing that I've noticed is there definitely is an age gap, but that also means a confidence gap. You mentioned it takes a lot of experience to be, selected to be especially. I mean, the trainers at the institute are like largely the personal friends of Dr. Shapiro still.
Hmm. True.
And so you've got some major confidence if someone is like has been doing EMDR for that long. But someone who's taking a lot of the people taking the trainings now are either in graduate school or just out of graduate school. And some consultees, have a tough time actually moving to EMDR reprocessing because they're afraid they're going to do it wrong or they're going to destabilize a client. And I can see an application for WeMind there for some common problems that consultants run into with consultee confidence. Could you speak to that? And could we just get into what WeMind is? You said you have a demonstration as well.
True. Yeah, no, I can show you, of course. And I think it's exactly what you're saying. There's so many great clinicians and trainers out there, but they're doing it for years and years. So it's natural for them and they're doing great work, of course. And then you're talking to yeah, like a 28-year-old or something that has done a 5-day basic training. At day 4 or 5, the head is exploding from all the different knowledge that they're getting. And I get that. And then they have to do it in practice. So,
Mhm.
okay, release them and do some sessions. And I think technology can really help there because EMDR, and that's an interesting thing how Dutchies or European
Mhm.
approach it more compared to US clinician. Here in the Netherlands, it's really a protocol. EMDR is a protocol, so it helps the clinician stick to the basic. In the US, in our experience, it's a bit different. But what our system does, and I think it does really well, is taking over or helping the clinician with doing the actual bilateral stimulation or dual attention stimulation, or how we call it, working memory stimulation.
Mhm.
Doing that for you as a clinician so you can focus on the client. So you know that stimulation is done at the right level. So you don't have to worry about it. You're not in doubt on that. And gives you more mental clarity and mental time to check with the patient or the client. And that's I think the first application where you see that technology will help a clinician achieve more, and that's only going to grow with recent developments that you're following with all the AI and large language models. But yeah, I think it's the beginning, but it already speaks for itself.
Yeah, so I think people are gonna understand a little bit better when you demonstrate this, but there are many bilateral stimulation programs online, some of them free, some of them subscription, but it's just a moving light. And also, if the audience is not familiar with working memory taxation as a theory, it's something that is, one of four major theories of how EMDR actually works, and is currently probably the most research supported, but possibly not the only way EMDR works. The idea is when
Mm-hmm.
you maximize working memory taxation, then it kind of gets the mind out of the way so that memories can reprocess as they naturally would, and you can do now what your brain should have done a long time ago. But
Mm-hmm.
if you tax working memory too much, you're going to get bad results because you just have a distracted client. If
Yeah,
you don't,
exactly.
yeah, and if you don't tax working memory enough, you're going to get terrible results, but well, maybe superior results because at least nobody's going to get destabilized. But everyone is different, right? And so this is where your AI comes in, from my understanding, is that the AI customizes the amount of working memory taxation to the client, and the client is doing the tasks, which is how you were saying it frees up the therapist.
It is exactly as you said. I couldn't explain it better. What we see is that there's a sweet spot in terms of memory taxation. There is a sweet spot, and that differs from client to client. So there can be some clients, for example, gamers or people on the spectrum, that can have a really high working memory capacity. They can do 100 things combined. So their optimal level of taxation, their sweet spot, will be higher than maybe an 80-year-old that has to focus on one task at a time. Taking that level, it is the estimation of a clinician to do that, and it's basically trying to see through the brain what the working memory capacity is, and we do that based on data. So reaction time, it's the rare paradigm, random interval repetition. So we give random task and you have to react on it, and based on how good you're doing that or how bad you're doing that, it will change it. I'm gonna show you in a minute. But it does that data based in real time data with algorithms and does it for you. And in traditional EMDR, I'm watching you and I have to make an estimation, right? So how fast do I have to do it? And there's there's a lot of great therapists that can do that really well. As I said, I think experienced one, people that are really good at it, it will come with time. But especially if you're new, or especially if you're doing 8 sessions a day, it can be really exhausting as well. So yeah, it's exactly as you said. It tries to help a clinician get most out of it, and it's therefore a really powerful phase four at least, but in more phases, desensitization tool. Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, let's see it.
Let's say I want to start manual, 25% horizontal. I just started, and now, as you can see, the ball goes from left to right. Let's pause it. When I put it on the adaptive AI mode, it will go faster or slower based on the unique performance of your client. The AI is measuring and registering how your client is doing, and it will intensify the program based on the performance of your client. So let's put it on adaptive, make it go random, and start the EMDR task. Let's switch to here. I press the arrow key down every time the ball changed from a ball into a cylinder, and you would see that it goes faster and faster. Normally you do a trial round with your client to see how fast he or she can handle, and after a minute or so, this slider is up. It started at 25%, it's already at 38, and this will go up until the sweet spot for your client. So play around with the settings. You can add the audio sound as well. What I then do is press the arrow key down for the visual task, so when the ball changed from a ball to a cylinder, and press the space bar when you hear that audio tones you're doing left and right. So we're going to show that as well. Here, audio tone, space bar, right hand arrow key down when the ball changes from a ball into a cylinder. As you see, it's a bit too fast for me, or it was registering how I did, and I saw a red flickering and I saw also a yellow flickering, so that means that there was no click or I was too late. You can also change the backgrounds here on the settings. We're going to add more and more backgrounds in the upcoming period. And last but not least, the exposure part. You can use exposure in EMDR. You can upload any type of video, audio, or image to your client. So if you have a photo of a person or a situation or an area on your computer, you can upload it and stream share it with your client. It can be something triggering, it can be something calming, it can be something really personal, because you can upload any type of photo yourself.
More to come in the second half of this conversation. Check out WeMind along with research and a 2-week free trial at www.moovd.nl/en. That's www.moovd.nl/en. If you're enjoying this conversation and you're a clinician treating complex trauma or a student learning how, email dissociativetable@gmail.com to join the discussion on the clinicians only discussion board. All right, so I hope that was fairly clear to most EMDR clinicians. And if you are not an EMDR clinician and there were some difficulties understanding that, I recommend that you sign up for a reputable EMDRIA training because EMDR changed the way that I do therapy. And although this is not an EMDR program, I've never had someone in one of the institute trainings who is an expert in another modality who has not said, this has changed my practice, even though I'm still an adherent to the other modality. So in any case, thanks very much. So right. Okay. So when I saw the video, the first thing that I thought is like my mind is exploding with all sorts of ideas on working memory taxation. And like Professor de Jongh's, like I took one of the very first EMDR 2.0 trainings. So I was like, that was my major tool for quite a while. So at that point, he would started developing something at Sidetrack, an inpatient facility called EMDR 3.0. And are you familiar with that? Sort of?
I'm familiar with Sidetrack. It's using WeMind as well, but please explain.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the idea is that with the EMDR 2.0, you're not only maximizing the working memory taxation, you're maximizing the level of disturbance, not such that the client is disturbed, but such that the working memory taxation is so great that the client isn't disturbed. and
Exactly.
It's like two planets colliding, and then you get these miracle cures. So EMDR 3.0 is where they actually use activating material as working memory taxation. So in an outpatient setting, you have to do this very carefully and definitely with client permission and release. But an idea, let's just, for instance, now I haven't done this particular thing. I'm just making up this example. Someone might get a picture of, let's say you've got a client who's been mugged at gunpoint, right? And has developed acute stress disorder. Or maybe it's 3 years later and their life has been ruined by PTSD after this mugging. So with EMDR 3.0, they would take a picture of a mugger, perhaps pointing a gun at you, and wave that back and forth and do the BLS with the picture of the mugger, with the idea that the client is assisted in bringing out the traumatic affect such that it can be reprocessed even faster. And Ad, being who he is using some pretty, or he was when I took the training, using some pretty extreme things in Sidetrack, all with client permission, because they're done with PTSD. So that was the first thing that I thought. I didn't know if you had heard of that, but have you considered using activating material as working memory taxation?
I think it's an interesting thing. I know in Sidetrack, for most US clinician, when we tell this, they're shocked. They have an exposure box with exposing material that can be guns.
Yeah.
It can be anything horrific. And when we tell that to US clinician, they're like, that's awful. But that's also set the difference, in my opinion, to how Dutch clinicians are trained compared to more the US approach. Um, it's an interesting one. So let's say we're doing the bilateral in our app. It's now a ball, like a circle moving from left to right. That can, in the near future, be a gun, or it can be a symbol. It can be a symbol. It can be something that triggers. What we already do in our system, and I showed it in the video before here, is that you can expose a client while doing the BLS with any type of triggering content. So I could upload a photo or video as a clinician, and at the exact time I want, I can make it go in front of the clinician or the client while the bilateral and the working memory tasks are on. So you're exposing somebody while in the set. So the use of our exposure library is really broad. Some people do it before, in the beginning of a session, to help somebody access the memory. Some do it in the end of a session when trying to validate if the SOT is really zero. Some do it in the session, so they're in the set, and now we're going to show you a photo of a gun. So I like the idea of actually making the bilateral the exposure content. So we're already combining it, but for us, as far as we know, they now call it EMDR 2.0. I've never heard of the naming 3.0, but it's an interesting idea.
I think he was just joking when he said that, but
Okay.
it's just what they did, and it is shocking to American clinicians when you say things like that. And I should mention that there's okay, so I took one of the first trainings 2019. They had the research at that point from 2015 to really be able to do this training very ethically. And I heard about it from an institute colleague who says, check this out. But in any case, for better or worse, check this out. So I think that maybe part of the shock is that EMDR, for instance, is preferred by the World Health Organization. You can read on their website because they consider it a soft approach. So CPT or prolonged exposure, like these have high dropout rates. Like and prolonged exposure, like Dr. Manfield was on a previous episode, and like in the famous study comparing prolonged exposure to EMDR, they said, oh, it's the same. They didn't take into account the fact that prolonged exposure had like this massive dropout rate. So yes, of course, when you compare the people who didn't drop out, it has a similar effect. But this was researched by someone else who went and found the people who dropped out and found that these people dropped out because it was making them worse.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people in the EMDR world are concerned with the EMDR 2.0 or the exposure material, because they're saying, oh, this EMDR works in a different manner.
Yeah.
Right. And so
I think there's like not one solution that fits all. I think all the approaches work. Like that's what I said in the intro, working with a lot of EMDR trainers and researchers. There's multiple modalities, multiple ways of approaching it. And that's why we try to combine it. But the interesting part, I think, is that there is so much research to back that that you almost can't deny it. Of course, it cannot be the style of a therapist. I know that. And there is some cultural things to consider. Here in the Netherlands, you don't get many client court cases through a therapist. And I've heard a lot of them in the US. So therapists are more afraid of breaking people, right? And we always hear like dissociation is the biggest fear of a clinician. And luckily, our tool will help with that. Adding more and more and optimal working memory stimulation will help you keep the client in the window of tolerance. So hopefully that will help for you as clinicians as well. But I get that, and that's why the Dutch approach will not work for most US-based clinicians.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, the fact is, no good clinician ever helped their client by protecting them.
True.
Like we are addressing, like this is a complex trauma show, right? But so we're talking about complex trauma is this massive set of, as Professor Vanderhart says, well, following Jongh, three major phobias: mental actions, memories, and parts of self, right? But a lot more mental illness than chronic childhood traumatization is phobia. And we're
Hmm.
trying to cut the dragon into pieces. So you have to look the dragon in the eye, though. But that doesn't
Hmm.
mean you have to eat the elephant in one bite, right?
Yeah,
So
true.
you're
True.
tight with the working memory. You're actually doing the opposite. You're titrating the affect by maximizing the BLS effect of avoiding um, affect intolerance and
True.
that sort of thing is what I hear you saying is like we are actually being client focused with this. We're not trying to.
No, we're focusing on building something for the client and for the therapist. And AI can go really far, and we get some clinicians that are concerned, and we get that. And mainly when we show them the product and show them the research that's behind it, because I think the research is most important. They get what we're doing.
Mhm,
For example, I think one of the major things we've did here in the Netherlands, we did a comparison study between the Lightbar sessions, between
mhm,
Lightbar EMDR sessions and the same sessions on the WeMind platform with
mhm,
complex PTSD patients. Was a study with two groups where we showed that the SOT dropped much faster in our condition in the WeMind, 49% faster. So in the end, you had like 23% faster sessions. Here in the Netherlands, that's important because
mhm,
it's regulated by the healthcare insurance. It's about getting more people in, more people out. So having a shorter session will make sense. In US, in my opinion, therapist and client relation is a bit more important.
mhm,
People are like people are seeing sometimes the therapist for years and years. In the Netherlands, that's sometimes the case, but in general, you do 4 sessions, 8 sessions, and then you're out. So it's about efficiency as well, getting the right outcome.
mhm,
And I think there are differences from the US. But the interesting topic would also be like, what can technology, so not only AI, do to make that whole pathway more efficient, more effective, help a clinician or a client more and more in their EMDR journey. And I think in the upcoming years, you will see a lot of innovations coming through EMDR as well, where you already see them in all different topics. One simple example, radiology or screening photos in a hospital, it's all AI doing that,
mhm.
making sure it's done correct, and it can do it more efficient. So why don't introduce those type of technologies in EMDR and see what it can do if we research it? And I think that's an interesting topic.
Thanks for listening. I thought that last point that Sander made about the current well-accepted, well-researched use of AI with the radiology community was highly effective. Now, in the next episode, I challenge that with a devil's advocate question, but as you might expect, his response is equally intelligent. We also get into attachment issues and complex trauma, and also some of the research with exposure and the intricacies of the working memory taxation theory. So stick around for that. But I hope this episode has helped you begin to challenge some of your assumptions about AI, think of new hard questions, some of which I hope I'll ask in the future 3 episodes containing this conversation. One thing I should mention is that without any financial compensation, I have tested WeMind myself, and I can come to one conclusion so far, which I believe that Sander and all of his colleagues would agree with, which is that if you're going to use WeMind with a complex client, you need to have training already in using regular EMDR old school EMDR with complex clients. But if you are a person with such experience, WeMind is probably a tool that you need to have or at least explore. After the conversation, Sander asked me, what do you think we could add to WeMind? And I said, Flash. So, although saying Flash did not suddenly de-traumatize some memory that Sander had, anyway, in all seriousness, I did experiment with using WeMind with Flash, and the results were remarkable. I think that they shed some light on how EMDR and Flash may work, commonalities in that. So I'll be publishing a brief video, a demonstration of the use of Flash with WeMind with a colleague, all ethical considerations taken care of. So look out for that too. As usual, our intro and outro music is provided by the band Cracked Machine in support of global access to effective trauma therapy. So thanks to them. Be sure to check out their new album on Bandcamp. Until next time.